Hey there, partners! Today, we're diving deep into the world of philosophy, where we'll explore three fundamental perspectives that have shaped our understanding of reality: materialism, dualism, and idealism. Buckle up because we're about to embark on a mind-bending journey. All right, let's kick things off with materialism. Picture this. Everything you see, touch, and experience is nothing but matter in motion. Materialism asserts that the universe and everything in it, including our thoughts and consciousness, can be explained solely by physical processes. It's like looking at the world through the lens of science, seeking to unravel the mysteries of existence through empirical observation and natural laws. Now, shift gears with me to dualism. This perspective, popularized by the likes of René Descartes, suggests that there's more to reality than meets the eye. Dualism proposes that the world is composed of two distinct substances, the physical and the non-physical, often referred to as mind or soul. It's like pondering the age-old question: what's the relationship between our bodies and our consciousness? Dualism dives deep into this mystery, challenging us to rethink our understanding of self and existence. And last, but certainly not least, we have idealism. Imagine a reality where the material world is merely a manifestation of consciousness itself. Idealism flips the script, suggesting that what we perceive as solid and tangible is, in fact, just a collection of ideas or perceptions within the mind. Think of it as reality being a product of our thoughts rather than the other way around. It's a perspective that challenges us to question the very nature of reality and our place within it. So, there you have it, folks. Materialism, dualism, and idealism. Three philosophical powerhouses, each offering its own unique perspective on the nature of reality. So, which one is the true one? First, we have to understand that this question is about the classic mind and body problem of philosophy. And second, to answer that, we have to use what is modal logic. Picture this. Instead of just dealing with true or false statements like classical logic, modal logic adds a whole new dimension by considering necessity, possibility, and impossibility. It's like expanding our logical saddlebag to tackle questions about what must be the case and what could be the case in different scenarios. Think of it to formalize and analyze statements about what's necessary or possible in various contexts. And modal logic isn't just confined to one field. It's used in philosophy, mathematics, computer science, too. So, in summary, there are three great ways to look at the world. 1. Materialism or physicalism, where only some kind of substance exists apart from any concept of mind. 2. Dualism, where substance and mind coexist. 3. Idealism, where only mind exists apart from any concept of substance. Next, we take a novel approach. We are going to use two modalities, famous ones, that seem logically valid but which yield two contradictory conclusions about God. However, the interest here is about the answer to our question. So, hang on. Let's first read each of the modal logic arguments. First is a famous version of the ontological proof for the existence of God, called unsurprisingly as Alvin Plantingas' ontological proof. Alvin Plantinga is a contemporary American philosopher of religion and professor emeritus at University of Notre Dame. His version goes as follows. It is possible that God, maximal great being, exists. If it is possible that God exists, then God exists in some possible world. If God exists in some possible worlds, then God exists in all possible worlds. Stop here and make a note. This means that all possible worlds are mindful. That is, contain a mind. If God exists in all possible worlds, then God exists in the actual world. If God exists in the actual world, then God exists. The second modal logic argument comes from Peter van Inwagen, also a professor of philosophy at Notre Dame, called the correct atheist proof. He was president of the Society of Christian Philosophers from 2010 to 2013. As a true philosopher, though, he isn't afraid to test modalities. It goes as follows. The word mindless is paraphrase. It is possible there is a non-sentient, mindless world. Since a non-sentient, mindless world is not incoherent, then it is a possible world. If a possible world is a non-sentient, mindless world, then God does not exist in that world. Therefore, God does not exist in every possible world. Therefore, if God does not exist in every possible world, God is not necessary, and by the law of contraposition, is impossible. Both of these arguments are valid from a modal logical point of view, but taken together make two contradictory conclusions. Nonetheless, we will not be looking at the divine conclusions per se, but rather their implications to our central question. That is, which modality is true, materialism, idealism, or dualism. First, let's examine Plantingas' argument in light of our question. Almost immediately we can see that it rules out materialism, since God must exist in all possible worlds, and, therefore, all possible worlds must be mindful. So now, if God exists, all possible worlds, including ours, must be mindful. This leaves us with two options, idealism and dualism. There doesn't seem to be any problem for God's existence and the idealists, since God is a mindful being. However, we next see a problem with dualism. If both mind and substance exist in the same possible world necessarily, then there must be some ontological mutual dependence, right? Here is where the second argument comes in. It is possible that a mindless world exists. Since there appears to be no incoherence, unless you can prove that substance and mind are somehow contingent, that is, dependent on each other. A dualism approach would serve the correct atheist proof. Very interesting train of logic. If there is a God, according to these arguments, all possible worlds must be ideal, and any idea of substance we understand derives from the mind. Mostly likely, God himself. The so-called physical world is grounded in God's mind. He must be the ground of being. Does this mean that if the correct atheist proof is true and there is no God in any possible world, then either dualism or physicalism must be true? This seems apparent, but it follows that if not all possible worlds are mindful, then substance, not mind, must be necessary, and all possible worlds must contain some kind of substance. Again, we have a problem with dualism. If dualism is true in the atheist modality, then we can posit that there is some possible world where mind is primary. In other words, if dualism is true and there is no God, then we must posit a possible world where there is no substance, only mind. In other words, the atheist modal logician must explain a possible ideal world where there is no God. The mind of that world, if not God, must be local to that world. The mind of that ideal world must be ontologically limited to substance of some sort. Otherwise, they would have to evoke a supernatural understanding undermining the atheist proof. That mind must be contingent because if it were necessary, it would be in all possible worlds and would be God. However, if only mind exists in that world, it would be by definition necessary. Doesn't that make the correct atheist proof prove God exists in all possible worlds? Otherwise, think about the modality messiness they would be in. Unless they argue for materialism, the atheist proof argument would be turned on its head because it logically posits an ideal world of mind. An ideal possible world would imply necessity. Necessity implies God. Therefore, the atheist proof rules out dualism. This leaves us with two options, materialism and idealism, materialism for the atheist and idealism for the theist. The materialism already knows that mind is possible because we experience it in the actual world. Dualism would imply God. So the materialist must make the presence of minds in the actual world either an illusion or what philosophers call epiphenomenal. In metaphysics, epiphenomenal refers to a concept or theory that suggests certain mental phenomena are secondary or byproducts of physical processes without having any causal influence themselves. In other words, it proposes that mental states or consciousness are merely epiphenomena, phenomena that emerge as a result of underlying physical processes but do not have any causal efficacy in the physical world. The problem with this is that it solves nothing for the materialist, because if the epiphenomena is assumed to be ontologically real, then they have converted to dualism. If dualism or idealism is true, then there is a God. At the very bottom, then, we have materialism that must posit the mind as illusionary and idealism which acknowledges mind. What are we left with now? The only modality that allows for atheism is materialism. Since mind is a prima facie experience in the actual world, it is a possible world. If it is possible in this world, it is possible as a standalone in some other possible world. If the mind is a possible standalone in some possible world, it is necessary. If it is necessary, it exists in all possible worlds. If that is so, then God exists and all possible worlds are ideal. If all possible worlds are ideal, so it this one. The mind exists in the actual world. If the mind exists in the actual world, a mindful world is possible. If a mindful world is possible, it is possible as a standalone world. If a mindful world is a standalone world and no substance exists, mind is necessary. If a mindful world is necessary, it exists in all possible worlds. A mind that exists in all possible worlds is God. And if there is a God, then this world is ideal, per Plantingas Argument.
Hey folks, if you like this video or want to give us a piece of your mind, please give us a holler in the comments below. We learn a lot by challenging ourselves and letting others also. Maybe some of you country scholars out there could improve this argument for idealism. We ain't above being corrected in the comments. We also need your subscriptions and likes too, if you would be so kind, partner. Also, check out our other podcast episodes here in the Unknown Texans Fourth Wall podcast. Much obliged, and may the Lord bless.